was living in a village called Pobwanli, which is very, very far north in Paju City, so it's the northern part of Paju. My TV was able to pick up the signals from North Korean broadcast.
Okay, Jacko, you've been in 4 of my neighborhood videos already.
Unbelievable.
Malidong,
Yes.
Gungcheongdong,
Yes.
Myeongdong and Cheongdong,
Yeah.
one of the first videos.
Yeah.
And people are curious about you.
No,
Maybe more so than the neighborhood.
that's crazy. Why would they be curious about me?
Because you know a lot of things about Korea and North Korea.
On this channel, we explore all 467 neighborhoods of Seoul. Sometimes I go on adventures alone, and sometimes with special guests like Jacco Zwetsloot, who knows a lot about certain places in the city, and South and North Korea in general. He's the host of the NK News podcast after all. I couldn't make many of the videos without him, but who is Jacco exactly? Many of my subscribers ask. And why did he come to Korea 20 plus years ago? It's time for a Dong special.
Let's start from the very beginning. I believe it was 96.
July 96, I arrived at Gimpo International Airport, spelled with a K, K-I-M-P-O, it's old romanization system. And I flew non-stop from Amsterdam to Seoul with Korean Air. Just finished university in Australia, but I was visiting my relatives and my father, who was then in the Netherlands. So I went to Amsterdam first and then flew to Seoul. It was very hot and very humid, and because I only had one suitcase, so I was wearing way too many clothes because I couldn't pack that much into my suitcase. I came to Korea in 96 to teach English with it was then called the Koretta program, K-O-R-E-T-T-A, Korean English Teacher Training Assistants, and later on it became the EPIC program, which is still run today. Because I arrived not knowing what the name of my program was. All I knew was that I'd signed a contract, and I thought somebody will be there at the airport with a sign that says, Jacco Zwetsloot, welcome to Korea.
Welcome, Jacko.
You know, come over here. And I must have done 10 or 20 laps around the arrivals hall in Gimpo Airport Terminal 1 or 2, and I couldn't see anyone that had a sign that looked like it was there for me. Now, it turns out, I find out later on, there were people there with a sign that said 1996 Koretta program. I didn't think that was Koretta. What's that? Almost 30 years ago now.
96.
Yeah.
I was 4 years old.
Wow.
And then, how long did you stay?
It was one contract, so I was here for 1 year. That year, it was difficult. I was living up in Paju, north of Seoul, and I didn't know many people, and the work was difficult too. And I wasn't enjoying it so much, so I had a calendar, and I was crossing off the days. How long do I have to stay here? When can I go back to Australia or to the Netherlands or
anywhere else?
Yeah, but at some point, I don't know, maybe 6 months in, I started to enjoy it and to make some friends and to learn a bit about the country and about the language. So in the end, I did 3 years with the EPIC program until June or July 99, and then I got married and moved back to Australia. So I was here 3 years that first time. Now, after living in Australia near my father for 4 years, my wife and I came back to Korea in early 2004. So I've been here since then.
What exactly was so appealing about Korea back then?
But I started to take an interest in what was happening around me. There were, of course, things happening with North Korea. In that first year that I was there was a submarine from North Korea that brought about 30 spies into Gangwon-do, and that submarine got caught on the rocks, and the spies were all caught and killed, except for a few who escaped back into North Korea. So I thought, this is really interesting. And then Hwang Jang-yeop, the secretary of the Korean Workers' Party and the creator of the Juche ideology, he defected to South Korea.
Yeah.
So there were so many things going on. But at the same time, Korea, it felt safe, it felt comfortable. I could walk around and know that I wasn't going to get robbed or mugged or attacked.
97 was the IMF crisis.
Yeah.
Do you, because if you read it in books, it sounds like a terrible time to have lived in, but you were here.
Yeah, so I was somewhat sheltered because I was working for the Korean government, for the Ministry of Education. I was going to get my salary every month. But there were a lot of people around me, a lot of my friends, for example, who were working in the private teaching industry, in the hagwons. Some of those hagwons, they collapsed. Sometimes the owners had a lot of debts, and some of those owners, in fact, one of my best friends, Carl, he was working at a hagwon in Jamshil. And overnight, the owners of that hagwon, they fled the country and just left the hagwon behind. They took all the money they could get, including a lot of borrowed money, and just left the country. And they weren't the only ones who did that.
Wow.
Up until 97, there was this feeling that if you had a job at a good corporation, you could have that job until you retired, at lifetime employment. And that dream ended during the Asian financial crisis, which in Korea is called the IMF crisis. So a lot of men lost their jobs. It was men mainly, because at that time still the world of white-collar work was dominated by males. The men were the breadwinners at that time. A lot of those men who lost their jobs each day, some of them would put their suit on as if they were going to work, and they would go out and look for a job, but because they couldn't tell their wife yet. A, it meant financial crisis, but B, also there was a great shame associated with that. So it was fascinating watching, but also disturbing because there was a lot of pain.
You're the host at
Hello,
NK News.
Bart's audience. Yeah, that's right.
You're like an expert on North Korea, right?
You have to be humble, Bart. I like to say I'm not the expert, but I interview the experts, so I know who the experts are.
But you learn always a bit from all the other experts.
That's right.
So,
So
in
I
the
get
end,
second-hand knowledge.
where did this fascination come from?
That first year when I was living in Korea, 96, 97, I was in Paju, which is the city in the north of Gyeonggi province, and it runs up against the demilitarized zone. So I was very physically close to North Korea. I went to a couple of these sort of lookouts looking into North Korea, and I could hear the propaganda music playing. And I was living in a village called Pobonli, which is very, very far north in Paju city, so it's the northern part of Paju. My TV was able to pick up the signal from North Korean broadcast. You could see North Korean propaganda television, partly blocked by the South Korean military jamming signal, but it wasn't completely blocked, so you could see it, but it wasn't a clear image, and you could hear it clearly. You couldn't watch too long, because after 5 minutes, your eyes would go sore, and you'd have to change channel. Looking at it, thinking, wow, this is the message that they're sending to South Koreans, imagining that South Koreans will be somehow attracted to this or converted by this. And I was fascinated by this idea of how do you get someone to come over? How do you convince somebody this Korea, this side is better? That same year, 97, I heard about a small handful of American soldiers who had defected to North Korea. So I think I really became fascinated with this idea of people crossing the border, and that began a lifelong fascination with this divided nation.
They did send me some balloons on my birthday on June 3rd.
Did they? Oh, that's nice. At that time, in the 1990s, they would send these balloons with leaflets, propaganda leaflets, trying to convince Koreans we're the better Korea, come over here. And that stopped around 2000, and then they started again when Park Geun-hye was president, and they stopped again when Moon Jae-in was president. And so I thought, they might start again this year, they might send leaflets. But no, they really seem to have lost interest in trying to appeal to or persuade or convince South Koreans, and now they're just sending trash. In that sense, I miss the old days where they would send leaflets that at least they had a message. You could study them and say, what a psychological effect are they trying to have here?
What is your favorite place in the capital?
That's a tough question. I knew it was coming. I like this area where we're sitting right now. We're next to the Donimun Bangwolgwan, or the Donimun Museum Village, which is wedged in between Gyeonggi-gung Palace on this side, and on the other side you've got Samsung Hospital. That's one of my favorite places because I've discovered it recently, and it's always quiet. So you can always find a nice quiet spot here.
Your favorite Korean dish?
I really like kimchi jjim, which is not as well known as it should be. Everyone knows kimchi jjigae.
It's my favorite food.
But kimchi, you too.
Kimchi jjim.
Yeah. They basically cook it very slowly for a long period of time. The pork has been stewed in the kimchi juices, and it falls apart so gently, so easily. But it's not sold in many restaurants. There's not many places. So when you know a good kimchi jjim place, you remember, you say, that's the one nearby. So.
Exactly. Kimchi jjim.
Kimchi jjim.
More restaurants, please. Jacko is also very good. I'd say a professional tour guide.
Thank you. I've 10 different tour packages.
10?
Yeah, you haven't seen all of them yet.
Oh my.
So I have 10 different routes with storytelling. So I make a storytelling tour that incorporates a bit of old history, a bit of modern history, and looking at interesting things. And so if people are interested, if they want to do a tour, now I do tours for small groups only. I only do it on demand. I don't do it regularly. I have to keep it as a hobby job so that it's always interesting and always fun. I don't want to do it every day, so it becomes a chore. But if people are interested, they can go to Tour with Jacko. So that's tourwithjacco.com, or you can email me at jacko.zwetsloot@gmail.com. Yeah, I love telling people stories about Korea, and I love pointing out interesting things. So come and tour with Jacko.
Thank you, Jacko.
Thanks, Bart. Always a pleasure being on the iGoBart podcast, the iGoBart video series.
Yeah, podcast. Well, it's a special edition of the Neighborhood series.
Yeah.
But we'll see you again, hopefully.
Yes.
We'll let you know. How do?